All right, in this video, we're going to talk about solving another quadratic, but this time I'm asking you to round your answer to the nearest hundredth, okay? Remember, when you're talking about solving quadratics, there are three different ways. There's a quadratic formula, there's the square root method, and there's factoring. And depending on what's given will dictate which method you should use. Because we have an A value, a B value, and a C value, that means we're either going to do the factoring method or the quadratic formula. And because the prompt says round your answer to the nearest hundredth, that implies it's probably some sort of irrational number. So we want to use the quadratic formula. Factoring is only going to work when you have a nice clean whole number or fraction. And if we're going to round to the nearest hundredth, it's probably not going to be written as a fraction. So we'll use the quadratic formula. Remember the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And so what we need to do first is identify our A, our B, and our C values. So in this case, we can say that our A value is 2, our B value is negative 5, and our C value is negative 11. A is in front of the x squared, B is in front of the x, and then C is the constant at the end. So we're just going to plug those in. Remember, when you plug them in, put them in parentheses. So it'll be negative parentheses, negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that'll be negative 5 squared, minus 4 times 2 times negative 11, all over 2 times 2. And then from here, we'll simplify. Remember, there's 4 things that we can simplify all in one shot. The 4 groups. The first group is this thing outside the radical. So negative 5 is positive 5. And then plus or minus, the next thing we can simplify is the squared term. So negative 5 squared is positive 25. The next thing we can simplify is all of this multiplication here. So first, a negative times a positive times a negative is a positive. And then 4 times 2 is 8 times 11 is 88. And then the last thing we can do all in one shot is the denominator. So 2 times 2 is 4. From here, we're going to combine the two terms inside the radical. So we get a nice clean radical there. 25 plus 88 is 113. And now here is the difference. What we do from here is going to be different depending on how we want to write our final answer. If we want it written in radical form, we're going to break down that radical, and you can watch that video where I talk about solving using quadratic formula and getting radical answers. But since I want the nearest hundredth, I'm just going to type this into my calculator right now, the square root of 113. And so I would end up with x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 113 is 10.630. 10.630. Now notice I went further than a hundredth. I went to a thousandth here. And the reason I went to the thousandth is because if I go to the hundredth, and then I keep working with that, then my final answer might be off of the actual rounded answer correctly. So I want to go further. And in fact, I should probably go a lot further when I'm writing this out. I shouldn't round in an intermediate step. I should only round at the end. So from here, we're going to break this apart into our two separate answers. We get x equals 5 plus 10.630 over 4. And then 5 minus 10.630 over 4, okay? And then we'll simplify each of these. Remember, you got to simplify the numerator first, so that'd be 15.630 over 4. And then this one's going to be negative 5.630 over 4. And then we'll just type these into our calculator and get our answers. So the 15.630 over 4 is going to be 3.908. And then the negative 5.630 over 4 is going to be negative 1.408. And then we want to round our answer to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to cut these off after the hundredth, after the penny is a hundredth, right? Because there's 100 pennies in a dollar. And then we'll round from there. So because the 8, the number that comes after it, is greater than 5, we'll round the hundredth up. So it'll be 3.91. And then same thing here. This will be negative 1.41. That's the nearest hundredth there. All right, so that's how you solve a quadratic and put your answer to around your answer to the nearest hundredth. If you need any help, please reach out in any way possible, and I'm glad to help you out.